Welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Secrets to Successful and Simple Employee Development by George Garrett of Future Focus Group. My name is Ryan Kauth and I will be your host today. I direct the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, at UW Green Bay. The Wisconsin SBDC at UW Green Bay is part of a statewide network and national America's SBDC network supporting entrepreneurs and business owners through no-cost, confidential business advising and targeted educational programs. Regional SBDC experts facilitate improvement and growth for small and emerging mid-sized companies and help launch successful new enterprises. The no-cost business planning and low-cost workforce leadership development training at the Wisconsin SBDC at UW Green Bay is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA. Our website is uwgb.edu/SBDC. Today we continue our 2015 monthly no-cost 30-minute topical webinars series designed for the success of small business owners and their executive team members. At the conclusion of this webinar, we will share the upcoming webinar topics, and we encourage you to consider registering for those. We thank Mickey Noon and Chad Van Andel from First Business Bank for their partnership in promoting these monthly webinars and for their dedication to small business success. We also thank Michael Wentworth and his company TMR Associates, the B2B appointment setting company providing qualified leads and market insights. We thank them for their partnership in developing these webinars. After the webinar, you will be emailed a link to a recording of this webinar. And during the webinar, you are invited to ask questions at any time. Please use the menu along the right side of your screen indicated here in the red circle. Type your question and hit enter. As soon as I see it, I will make note of it for the presenter to address toward the end of our webinar. And now I'd like to turn it over to our expert presenter this month, George Garrett of Future Focus Group. George?
Thank you, Ryan. Here we are at our webcast today, and hopefully you'll see shortly a picture of me come up on the screen. And Ryan, it's not necessarily working right now. There I am.
There you go.
I am broadcasting from Cold Spring, Texas. As you can see, the lips are moving, and it's anything but cold in Cold Spring, Texas. And in fact, if anybody's kept up with the national weather map, we've had a brutal assault during the month of August, and it kind of reminds me of a war general. He said, you know, if I only went out to Texas and lived in hell. And I can tell you today, in this past few days, development. This is a very important topic happening throughout the world, and especially the United States, as you're going to see in a very few minutes. Before we do, maybe something relatively new concept that we're talking about might be a little bit new. So I put this graphic up to show everybody that what we don't know far outweighs what we know. So we need to keep an open mind, and that becomes a conundrum as we go through some process like this. And in fact, many years ago, Noel Birch, who was another consultant, as they developed a new skill, you go from the unconscious incompetence to the unconscious competence state. And in the meantime, you're learning these things. In the unconscious incompetence state, where we find ourselves when there's a new process, a new job, a new project, and so forth, we're probably in that state, and we just don't know what we don't know. They don't understand, people don't understand how to do something, and does not necessarily even recognize this deficit. And sometimes they even may deny the usefulness of the skill. But as we go through this process, as we go through the learning stage, we end up where we're at the unconscious competence state, where we have had so much practice with a skill that it becomes really second nature. We just do it. So having said that, let's get into some very important baseline information. Here's some modern day realities that we are faced with today. Here's some numbers that I hope you find compelling. First, as it stands today, 86% of employees want development more so than money. Now, this goes contrary to what leaders think about things, but the fact of the matter is we have this intrinsic nature about us, and we want development really more than we want the financial rewards, although the financial rewards are important. Secondly, 79% of all companies feel they have a real significant engagement and retention issue going on in the world today. And in fact, today, engagement is one of the key buzzwords in every organization that we come in contact and work with, or looking to find the magic formula for engagement. Engagement is so important because in the United States, each and every year, about $500 billion are lost in productivity due to the fact that people aren't engaged. Thirdly, about 75%, or 3 out of 4 companies, are reporting that they're having trouble finding people that they need. Now, this is a real anomaly given the fact that we have relatively high unemployment, even though the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics will report that there's 5.3% unemployment out there. It's actually much higher than that. In fact, unemployment, real unemployment in the United States today, probably is somewhere between 15 and 20% unemployment. The 5.3% that's reported by the government really only reflects those people who are receiving some assistance as a result of their unemployment. So that's a big issue. Moreover, 60% of the workforce out there today would change jobs if they could. Now, these 4 sets of data right here make me think of a term that comes to my mind. I think we're facing chaos right now. Even more so is the fact that right now only 6% of all organizations believe their current manner of handling performance is even worthwhile. So invert that, and I'm going to say, okay, wow, 94% feel it's probably not worth anything. Finally, people in the work today want purpose. They want purpose in their lives, and they want purpose in their work. And if we take a look at just what the Wikipedia model did, and we all use Wikipedia, it is an online encyclopedia forum. They actually went to head-to-head competition with Microsoft a few years ago. Microsoft wanted to be the dominant player, in the online encyclopedia world, and Wikipedia beat them out, even though Microsoft have all the resources, staffing, and everything else. And a lot of people don't realize this, but Wikipedia does not have a staff. Their work is done by a team of volunteers who contribute up to 20 hours per week free to make their voices known. They do the research, the follow-up, and so forth. So today you have Wikipedia translated in about 290 languages around the world, and it is the largest online encyclopedia that's out there. So these are some of the realities. These are also problems. They're real problems, but they're solvable problems. So I think we need to take a look at things that have gone wrong, starting with the fact that churn in any organization costs a lot of money. We mentioned a few minutes ago about the fact that lost productivity is about $500 billion just in lack of engagement, but there's another factor that happens, and when people just have had enough and they leave their jobs. It costs a lot of money. In fact, in the most conservative estimates, one single turnover costs about 30% of that employee's annual salary or wage. The other thing is, if we take just the state of Wisconsin, where Ryan is located, in the state of Wisconsin, the average turnover there in non-farm labor is something like 20%. So if you're an enterprise manager, a department head, a section leader, or whatever, just imagine that you are going to be losing 1 out of about 5 employees if you're located in that state. And Wisconsin has some of the lowest unemployment, one of the lowest turnover rates in the United States. Secondly, what we've tried to do in terms of developing people, we've tried to use this thing called performance appraisal, the annual thing that we sit down with our boss and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is, about 98% of the people out there actually despise this process. They don't like it. Thirdly, 90% of the performance appraisal systems out in the market today simply don't work. They don't work and probably never have worked. So if you take a look at these factors here and think about it and say, okay, if this is any other measurement of the business, if this is any other business metric, what would happen? Well, it would probably go away. because it's just that ineffective. So what do? Well, every company out there has prerequisites assigned to jobs. You hire people based on their knowledge, skills, or abilities. Unfortunately, when they get into the workforce, they seem to stop right there. We don't do things to bring it forward to create competencies. And I think that's the first secret to this, is creating competencies for jobs. There's an old saying that you hire for the KSAs. You make a hire decision based on the KSAs, but what helps a company grow and helps an individual grow is the fact that we need competencies. More so that even the American Institute for Certified Public Accountants, along with the Society for Human Resources Management, have abandoned their old concepts of the testing mechanisms to certify people, and they have gone with a competency model. So if you're going to be certified in either one of those areas in this day and time, you're actually going to have some proven methods of doing this. It's no longer going to be satisfactory to have rote memory, rote recall, this kind of stuff. So we think, and my partner and I think that in the modern sense of today, there's probably three things organizations should be always constantly looking at. And we call this the pillars of an evolved workforce. First, you need to have the discovery. You also need to develop people, and you need to deploy people. We think today, though, we're talking about development, so the rest of my talk is going to center around this concept of development. Today's workers, whether you are a knowledge worker or whether you are a factory worker, a producer, an integrator, fall into 5 major competency areas. They are intellectual, interpersonal, leadership, and we think producer people, have involvement more so than leadership, but it is a competency. Organization, we also think that producers, are measured on quality and quantity versus, how the organization is impacted by your decisions. And fourthly, self-management. Why self-management is a competency in our view is the fact that the organizations are becoming flatter each and every day that goes by. With mergers, acquisitions, buyouts, and so forth, organizations are indeed becoming a much flatter world to work in. So you want people to have this ability to self-manage, because that goes back to one of the first slides I put up. We said that people are looking for a purpose. They're looking for more autonomy. So self-management then becomes a competency that we deal with. So let's take one of the competencies, and I use intellectual because it's the first one that appears on the competency matrix that we have. And let's talk about what is a defined competency. Let me first start out by telling you that we think these are the 5 competencies found in each particular type of job. No matter what you do, if you're a knowledge worker, you have 5 sets of competencies. If you are a producer, you have 5 sets of competencies. You'll see that they're pretty closely aligned. But the beautiful thing about when you're working with the competencies is the fact that you have your own definition of what constitutes intellectual. But we think, in the research and when we were putting this together, we think that it's going to fall into kind of like 4 major categories, subcategories of intellectual. For example, we think intellectual is based on one's intellectual ability. An analytical skill is simply the ability to visualize, to articulate, and to solve both complex as well as uncomplicated problems, and then make decisions that are sensible based on available information. So we think that the subcategory of intellectual is analytical, for one. Secondly, the technical skill is a subcategory of this, and that is the knowledge and abilities necessary to accomplish mathematical, engineering, scientific, computer-related duties, as well as other specific duties, for that particular job. This is the actual brain power that you need to get the job done. The third definition that we think falls under a competency, intellectual competency, is problem solving. Now, problem solving skills really entail assigning two different types of problem solving, those that are ill-defined as well as those that are well-defined. And this is where you take the appropriate solutions and make a decision. The well-defined are easier than the ill-defined But the fact of the matter is the ill-defined doesn't have any clear goals. They don't have solution paths or even an expected solution, whereas the well-defined have a very well-designed, preconceived way of getting the problem resolved. And fourthly, we think project management is a subcategory of the intellectual competency. Project management is simply the ability to evaluate, analyze, design, develop, implement, and monitor. So this is an example of a defined competency of the 5 that we originally listed. Now, how do you measure this? Well, the measure is really done in a performance management setting. Not performance appraisal, but performance management, because we think that is the key to the future, especially as we have to get into an emerging workforce that's coming into the majority very, very soon. It's not judgmental, for one thing. It's just not judgmental. You're not sitting in judgment of someone. You're actually working with someone to help develop their skill. Thirdly, it's fact-based. It's based on the fact that the company or the organization has defined what these competencies are and then provide a pathway to get it done. The wonderful thing about this is the choice is very simple. When you do an assessment of an individual, you're not looking at graphic grading scales, you're not looking at a bell curve, you're not looking at ranking system, you're just simply looking at whether someone has achieved a strength or do they have a development need. That's how simple this is. However, you must understand that performance management requires a little bit of leadership work, including establishing a plan with the employee. No matter what format you use on this, you really need to sit down and have a plan of how you want to develop that individual. One of the things that I think we're notorious at in terms of leadership is we throw something out there against the wall and hope that it sticks, and that's not the way this works with development of the modern workforce. Secondly, you just need to track that competency that is being developed. If you have 5 of them, there's just 5 tracking mechanisms. It's really simple to do. And then you revisit periodically to provide the guidance necessary to get this competency to be unconsciously competent. And fourthly, you just assess at the end of the cycle. It's that simple of a process. And here's what it looks like, beginning with the fact that you need to make sure that you have a foundation that's well done. Many companies out there have mission, vision, and values, and then they act contrary to what their mission, vision, and values are. But if you truly have a good, strong mission and vision and value statement, this is the beginning of this. And then you simply put people in the cycle where you define the competency, incorporate it into the job description. Let me just detract for a second and say, one of the things that we find in our work is that some of the things that's so poorly done is the job description. A job description is much more than just a statement of 10 to 12 tasks. A job description should encompass a lot more, and it should include the competencies because people need to know what is expected of them. And then you make your assessment, and then you develop the plan. It is that simple of a process. So what can you do in the role? Here's some ideas that we have on a journey that we call a new journey in terms of developing employees as a development tool. Performance appraisal is not a development tool. You replace it with a better process such as employee development. Now, performance, especially in the United States today, and in fact, if we take a look at Accenture, they have 330,000 worldwide employees, and effect number 1, they said, we want to our employees. And Deloitte also is taking a look at a much different system rather than sitting in judgment of people. Now, Dr. Peter Schultes, who is originally from the Madison area of Wisconsin, developed a concept of performance appraisal. Actually, was a concept fact that people are put into that process. He said, basically, performance appraisal is the one time a year you find out who has domain over you. And in fact, he used a little cartoon in his book that he wrote in 1999. It was a guy, if you can imagine, a manager sitting at his desk, and the worker was there. And the manager looks at the workers and says, okay, Smithers, you've got 12 minutes to tell me what you did wrong last year. And I think that's the overarching theme of things that we do with performance appraisal. And I think you need to commit a culture for your employees, create that culture by your very actions. Many times we refer to it as the shadow leadership. Whatever you're doing at the top is going to pervade throughout the entire organization. But if you have, as a leader, a culture of commitment, then your employees are going to respond accordingly. You also need to have continuous dialogue. And development is not that annual event where we're sitting down and saying, okay, well, this is what your score is. You're good, so you're going to get a 2.75% increase. Development is a continuous dialogue where the leader is working with the employee periodically, a mechanism that you use to make sure that they are achieving their competency. Also, you just need to design your performance management system based on multiple channels. Today, the people who are listening to this broadcast are actually going through some sort of external development by at least adhering and understanding a different concept in terms of employee development. But we also have internal mechanisms that happen in the workplace, in addition to the external training and education that takes place, and the special projects. We need to use all of these channels to capture the person's ability to achieve that particular competency. Another thing you can do is download our white paper that's found at www.futurefocus is called, are entitled, The Evolved Workforce. Even better, you can actually read our book. We wrote Evolved. It's found on Amazon, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, as well as our at a fair market value, especially if you have a reader, and you can download the book for about $5.99. This is a picture of our book. And if you want to call us, my partner in Wisconsin is Teresa Zimmerman. Her number is 920-207-832-221-0019. With that, I appreciate your attention today. I hope you got a little bit of information, even though it was at a 30,000-foot level, and I hope that we all have a successful journey into a new way of doing things. Ryan?
George, thank you so much. Really valuable information and a lot of newer information, I would say, for many of us. A couple of questions that have come in, and if you're on the webcast, you can certainly type a question to me as well. But George, this is the question I get in just about every webinar is, how do I start? If there's one or two or three things I should do as soon as I'm done watching this, what should I do? How do I start?
A good question. I appreciate that. It's kind of difficult to answer that without knowing where someone resides within the organization. If you're a leader, you know where to start. You start by just abandoning some of the things that we have been taught to believe in that just simply don't work and probably never did. If you're not in that position to make that kind of change, then I think you really need to just start talking about this. There's a myriad of information on the internet, the Society for Human Resources Management, the Human Capital Institute. There's a lot of good research out there. I would even encourage you to read Dan Pink's book called Drive. Drive helped us formulate some things a few years ago when we started our business, and I think it's got a lot of good information as to what needs to be done, what has not worked. So those are a few things that you can do, but again, I'm not sure what part of the organization that you're occupying, but leadership, you can do one thing, and if you are an employee, you can start articulating this stuff. Things have to change.
Thank you, George. And the slide before this obviously covered a lot of those things as well. The other question, and I guess it kind of, you covered some of this in the last slide and in your answer just now, but the question came through basically about kind of the non-leader, the high performer in the company. And the question is, how can someone that is not part of management, but is a high performer, change how larger organizations function to be more in line with your model? I know you answered some of that, but maybe there's some other things you've thought of that could help those individuals.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm going to go back to performance appraisal a little bit. There's been a lot of research in neuroscience of late and the dynamic that performance appraisal puts people in. And in fact, an article that was published just this past week by the Society for Human Resources Management, I can tell you it was a very extensive research. It says, it's the time that one person is a judge and jury for the other. The research on neuroscience says that even if you are a high performance performer and you're placed in this position, it usually is something that results in defensiveness and results in worse performance. The thing that I would suggest that you do is maybe educate your boss, because they are in need of a lot of this kind of education to understand what needs to be done to go down a different path. What we know is what has been tried in the past is just not working and will not work going into the future. You cannot use 20th century methods in a 21st century world. It's as simple as that.
George, thank you. And again, thank you so much for the webinar. We're out of time for today. If you have more questions, I'd encourage you to contact George directly. And you will be receiving an email in a little bit with a recording of this webinar and some contact information of George's that you can follow up with him and Teresa. So George, thank you very much. Our next webinar features Tony Bush of Priora Cash Flow Management. He will present how to manage your banking relationship and not be managed by it. In October, Dick Dubois of BlindSpot will present how your workflow improves your bottom line. Then in November, how to harvest maximum value from your business. And in December, how to use benchmarking to increase your business value. You can register for our on-site workshops, virtual certificate programs, and all upcoming no-cost webinars at uwgb.edu/SBDC. We also have several past webinar recordings there on sales, marketing, business ownership, hiring, and leadership. In closing, I would very much like to thank George Garrett and Teresa Zimmerman of Future Focus Group. George, thank you. Mickey and Chad at First Business Bank, and Michael Wentworth of TMR Associates. And thank you all for attending. Now you know the secrets to successful and simple employee development. This concludes our webinar.